So the first question is, when one feels hungry, thirsty, sleepy, sick, tired, hot, cold, there is a physical sensation of these conditions, and usually also thoughts associated with the condition. For example, if we are very hungry, we might feel the urge to get food, or if we are sick, besides the physical condition, we might be worried or anxious to see a doctor. In any case, is it ego alone, the experiencer of both the physical condition and the mental states derived from the condition? Since Bhagavan says the body is insentient like a pot in verse 10 of Uladunarpadu, Anubandham, we must infer the body can't feel the disease, just be the recipient for the disease, to appear or manifest, whereas it is ego that experiences pain, anxiety, worry, and so on. Is this correct?
Yes, it is ourself as ego alone who experience phenomena of all kinds, whether physical or mental. Bhagavan makes this clear in so many ways. For example, in verse 22, I think it is, yes, verse 22 of Ulladu, he begins with the word mati, which in this context means mind. And in the Kali Vemba version, he added before the word mati, evayam karnam, which sees everything. That implies which experiences everything. And here, mind means, when Bhagavan talks about mind, we need to distinguish in which sense he's using the word mind. The term mind can refer to all the other thoughts, which are all objects. Or the mind can refer to the knower of all those other thoughts. In other words, the first thought, I, the ego. It is ego that knows everything. So when he says it's the mind which sees everything, he's using the term mind there in the sense of ego, the knower of all phenomena. And when he says in verse 10 of Uludunaplu Bandam, the body is insentient like a pot, what he means by the body is not just the physical form of the body. As he says in verse 5 of Uludunapadu, Uru Pancha Kosa Uru, the body is a form of 5 sheaths. Therefore, all 5 are included in the term body. So when Bhagavan's talking of the body, in most cases, he's referring not just to the physical form of the body, but to all the 5 sheaths. For example, when he describes ego as the false awareness, I am a body. In other words, that which is aware of itself as I am this body. What he means by body is not just the physical form of the body, it's all the 5 sheaths. The 5 sheaths being this physical form, the life that animates it, and the mind, intellect, and will that operate within it. All these 5 are jada, as Bhagavan says in verse 22 of Upadesha India. He says, what he says in verse 22 of Upadesha India, since body, mind, intellect, life, and darkness. Darkness is there referring to the Anandamaya kosha, or will. That's the darkness of desire, which is what draws our mind outwards and therefore conceals the real nature from us. Since all these 5 are all jada and asat. Jada means they're devoid of awareness. Asat means they're devoid of existence. They have no real existence of their own. They just seem to exist. So since they're jada and asat, they are not I, which is sat. So here Bhagavan makes it very clear that when he says the body is insentient, he's referring to all the 5 sheaths. So since the 5 sheaths, why he emphasized that the 5 sheaths are insentient is that they're all phenomena. They're all things known by us. This physical body is obviously it's a physical phenomenon. It's something we can perceive. The life, though we can't exactly see the life, we can see all the signs of life in terms of the breathing, the heartbeat, the digestion, all these physiological functions. These are all the manifest form of the prana. The prana is that life force. So though we can't see the prana as such I mean, we can't see it as a physical object. We can see all its physical effects, but we're very well aware of the prana, even though we can't. We can only even apart from the physical manifestations, we're aware of what it is to be alive. Life is something more subtle than just these all these physiological processes. It's the force that drives and holds these physiological processes together, gets them all functioning in a coordinated manner. And then the mind, in this context where the Manamaya Kosha, the sheath composed of mind, that refers to all the grosser functions of the mind. That is perceptions, memories, thoughts, feelings, emotions, and so on. These are all described as the mind. These are the grosser elements of mind. These are all things that we're aware of. We're aware of our perceptions, we're aware of our memories, we're aware of our thoughts, feelings, and so on. These are all they're all objects known by us. Likewise, the intellect. We are aware of the workings of the intellect, the the understanding, the judging, the clarity, the distinguishing, the power to distinguish one thing from another. These are all the functions of the intellect. We're aware of all these functions. And the will, in its grossest form, consists of all the desires, attachments, hopes, fears, and so on. In a subtler form, it consists of the likes and dislikes that give rise to the desires and so on. And still subtler form is the inclinations or vasanas. We are aware of all these things. So all these things are objects known by us. So none of these things know themselves. Perceptions don't know themselves. Memories don't know themselves. Thoughts don't know themselves. Feelings don't know themselves. The functionings of the intellect don't know themselves. The vasanas, the likes and dislikes, the desires and attachments, they don't know themselves. They're all things experienced by us. And it's only when we rise as ego, thereby taking this body consisting of five sheaths to be I, but we're aware of all these things. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 4 of Uludunapadu, Uruvum Tanayin Ulhu Paramatran. If oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. If oneself is not a form, who can see their forms and how? We seem to be a form only because we've risen as ego, because the nature of ego, as soon as we rise as ego, we attach ourselves to the form of a body. We identify this body consisting of five sheaths as I. So it's only as ego that we're aware of all these phenomena. Phenomena seem to exist only in the view of ego. This is why Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uludunapadu, Ahandayundayan anatumundahum. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. Ahandayindrail indruanatum. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Everything here refers to all the phenomena. The reason they come into existence only when ego comes into existence, and the reason they do not exist when ego doesn't exist, is that they seem to exist rather only in the view of ego. So in sleep, we don't rise as ego, so we're not aware of the body, the world, the mind, the thoughts, the feelings, perception, memories. We're not aware of anything other than our own ever self-shining being. I am. That is the constant, the one constant awareness. That is the fundamental awareness. Awareness of all other things arises only when we rise as ego. So ego is the experiencer of everything. So whether it is the um, the physical symptoms of the disease or all our reactions to those physical symptoms of a disease, the emotional reaction, the worry, the concern, all these things, all are phenomena experienced by us. So this is fundamental in it's a fundamental distinction made in Vedanta and in Bhagavan's teachings. The first thing we need to clearly distinguish is to distinguish the knower from the known. This is what is called drik drisya viveka. Distinguishing, drik literally means the seer, drisya means what is seen, but it's not referring just to seeing through through the eyes. Seeing is used in a metaphorical sense to refer to all experiences. So we need to distinguish the experiencer from everything that is experienced. Now it seems to us that we are this person, this body consisting of 5 sheaths. But if we think about it carefully, these are all things that are perceived by us. This body and mind and all the 5 sheaths, it appears in our view and it disappears in our view. It appears when we wake up, it disappears when we go to sleep. In dream, some other body appears. But in sleep, no body at all appears. But we remain constant throughout all. We are the one constant in all these 3 states. So since all phenomena appear and disappear in our view, they are something other than ourselves. So though we now are mistakenly aware of ourselves as if we were this body is actually, this body means all the 5 sheaths are actually drisya. They're objects of perception. They're not the perceiver. The perceiver is ourself as ego. So only when we distinguish ourselves as the knower from all these things that are known, can we begin to investigate what we actually are. Because so long as we mistake ourselves to be any object, any phenomenon, anything that is experienced, if we're asked to investigate ourselves, we'll be investigating phenomena rather than investigating ourselves, the knower of all the phenomena. So this distinguishing ourself as a knower from everything that is known, that is a drik-drisya viveka, is absolutely fundamental. So it's very important that we understand this very clearly, that we are not anything that is any object of perception. We are the perceiver of all these things. Of course, that's not what we ultimately are, but we first need to distinguish ourselves as the perceiver. And then this perceiver, this seer, this knower, is what we have to investigate. And when we investigate ourselves keenly enough, we will find that we are not even the knower. We're not even that which experiences all these things. We have a pure awareness from which this knowing, this experiencing ego arises and into which it subsides. Because ego, the knower of all phenomena, appears along with phenomena and disappears along with phenomena. So from what does it appear and into what does it disappear? That is into our being, the fundamental awareness I am. So that is what we actually are. But in order to experience ourselves as that pure awareness I am, we need to investigate ourselves as the ego that we now seem to be. We seem to be ego so long as we're aware of other things. So if we focus our entire attention on ourselves, to the exclusion of all other things. In other words, if we attend to ourselves so keenly, but we cease to be aware of anything else, then we will be aware of ourselves as pure awareness. As soon as we're aware of ourselves as pure awareness, we'll cease to be ego, because ego is the impure awareness, I am this body. When we actually experience ourselves as, we actually are, namely as the pure awareness I am, ego is thereby annihilated. So the very basis of Bhagavan's teachings, the very basis of all of Vedanta, is this distinguishing ourselves from a body that we seem to be. Now, Bhagavan has emphasized this in so many ways. And this is the fundamental teaching of the Upanishads. It's a fundamental teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna begins his teachings in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, distinguishing ourselves from the body, saying it's the body that dies. But whether the body is just like the clothes, we put them on, and when they get worn out, we discard them and put on a new set of clothes. Likewise, this body, it's something other than ourselves. I mean, in the 13th chapter, he talks about the kshetra and the kshetrajna. Kshetra literally means the field, but he explains it in this context, it refers to the body. And the kshetrajna is the knower of the body. That is ego. So if we investigate this ego, we will then know ourselves as the underlying reality of ego, which is the pure awareness I am, in whose view nothing other than itself exists. It's only when we rise as ego, as Bhagavan says in verse 4 of Ulanaptu, if oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. So we're aware of phenomena only when we mistake ourselves to be one among those phenomena, or a set among those phenomena, namely this person that we now seem to be, this person consisting of 5 sheaves. I hope that's a clear answer to that question. I mean, I could have answered the question in one word, yes, because what the questioner asked is, I mean, when he said, is this correct? Yes, it is correct, but I just elaborated upon it because it's very, very important to understand this.
Michael, can I ask you a follow-up question?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, well, you said the prana or life is one of the 5 sheaves, yes, as Bhagavan tells us.
Yes.
So we have to infer that life or prana is jada. I mean, usually
it's jada,
science.
Yeah, all the 5 sheaves are jada.
Right. We usually think that life is what brings awareness to the body and what makes us know
it's
the world.
It's awareness in the form of ego that brings life to the body, not vice versa. we put
Without an experiencer, life,
the cart
there's
before the horse. If we think life brings awareness.
Right. Yeah. Well, so life needs an experiencer to
Yes.
a life body, of course.
Everything needs an experience. Nothing exists in the absence of the experiencer, namely ego.
So it is also it is ego that allows the mental state to arise, our mental.
Yes. It all arises only in the view of ego. All these things arise.
We allow it, we experience it, and it is by turning our attention within that we can withdraw our attention from it, turning within ourselves. It is all we have all the power. I mean, because we allow it and we can refrain from.
When you say we allow it, it's more than just allowing. That is all the mental activity is just a play of our vasanas. And the vasanas are ego's likes and dislikes. So that is the driving force behind it all. That is why the vasanas are referred to as the karana sarira, the causal body. Because they are the seeds that give rise to all phenomena. That is, phenomena are called vishayas. The seeds of those phenomena are called vishaya vasanas. They are nothing but our own likes and dislikes in their subtle form as inclinations.
Mhm. And one last question, Michael.
Yes.
Can we say that in the question I talked about our mental states and our physical condition or
Yes.
physical
Yes.
sensations, etc. So could we say that our mental states are caused by us as ego, whereas our physical conditions are brought by prarabdha? Is it very broadly?
It's not quite as simple as that. We can't so simply distinguish from, but yeah, it's very difficult. That is, prarabdha is what we are given to experience as the result of past actions. But how we respond to things is so tied up with it. We can't, it's not easy to distinguish, and we need not distinguish. We need not be concerned about this. The thing is, whatever we experience, whether it's prarabdha or whether it's a result of our reaction to the prarabdha. For example, we get a disease. That disease may cause so much worry, so much anxiety, so much fear, all these things, that our response to it in the form of anxiety and fear and so on, that is that's not necessarily part of the prarabdha. That's part of our response to the prarabdha. But we need not distinguish these things, because whatever we experience, whether it's a prarabdha or whether it's our response to the prarabdha, it's all phenomena. And all phenomena are other than ourself. So whatever it is that arises, to whom does it arise? To whom does it all appear? So we get some fear because we are told that we got a life-threatening illness or something. We get fear and so on. To whom is this fear? To whom is this anxiety?
Mhm.
So whatever
Okay.
the phenomenon may be, whether it's things that are completely out of our control, the world's appearance, the weather, or whatever it may be, to whom do all these things appear? So that when Bhagavan says to whom, he's not just asking us to ask the question. He talks about investigating to whom. So to whom do all these phenomena appear? To me, who am I? We turn our attention back to ourself, the one to whom all these things appear. That's what Bhagavan means by investigating to whom. So that is the practical application of the Dritrisya Viveka. We're distinguishing ourselves as the knower from all other things, and we apply that understanding in practice by attending only to ourselves and not to any phenomena.
Right. Okay, thank you very much, Michael.
Okay, right.
Namo Ramanaya.
Namo Ramana.
The next question. It could be said that the love that is required to go within oneself and remain in the self can be strengthened by the intention to go inward, in addition to the effort of attention. This is a question. That is, while we find it difficult to go inward because we are pulled towards the world, perhaps the intention as a component of will and devotion to investigate who we are can aid attention itself. The mind is deceptive because its nature is to think about other things. So attention on the self is constantly snatched away by memories, images, sensory impressions, desires, likes, and dislikes of the mind itself. In this sense, as I practice, I've discovered that the intention to attend to the self helps sustain attention. This distinction between intention and attention may seem subtle or trivial if we consider that obviously, if we don't want to go toward the self, then nothing will take us there. But intention as a subtle and constant movement of love for the one being perhaps can help us remain in it.
Yes, but that is, what is it that drives the intention? As is implied here, the driving force behind any intention. If we intend to go within, why do we intend to go within? Because we have a liking to know what we actually are. We love to we at least we have some liking to know what we are, so we try to know what we are. So intention is driven by our will, our love to know what we actually are. So whatever we may intend to do, we have so many intentions in life, but we go through life, we intend to whatever. There's so many things we intend to do. We intend to do something because we either like what that thing, or we like what we think will be the result of that. So I intend to be a better person, to be kinder, be more considerate, and so on. Why do I intend to be that? Because I think that if I'm kinder, more considerate, my life will be more pleasant. So all intentions, the driving force behind any intention is the will. So rather, I mean, it's not wrong to think of it in terms of intention, but it's important to understand that what drives the intention, what shapes our intentions is our will. So, and the will is absolutely essential in this. Why we have difficulty attending to ourselves, because we have more liking to attend to other things. So that is why Bhagavan often said, Bhakti is the mother of jnana. Bhakti in this context means the love to know ourselves. Without that love to know ourselves needs to be wholehearted and all-consuming, because it needs to overcome it needs to become stronger than all the Vishaya vasanas, the seeds of the inclinations to be aware of anything other than ourself. So ultimately, as Bhagavan often said, this spiritual path is nothing but a battle going on within our own will. The battle between our Vishaya vasanas, the inclination to attend to things other than ourselves, and the Sat vasana, the inclination to attend just to ourselves, to our own being. So yes, we obviously we need to have a very strong intention to know, to attend only to our being, but the driving force behind that intention is the love to know what we are. So if we consider intention as the consequence of our love, yes, then obviously intention does have a part to play. I hope that, I don't know if the person who asked that question is here today, but have I answered that question adequately?
Yes, Michael, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. But do you understand why I emphasize, rather than emphasizing, I mean, intention obviously is important, but understanding what's behind the intention, which is the love, that is the key thing. Do you understand why I was emphasizing that?
Yes, because when I say that, when I practice, I feel like intention is very important, because it comes from the heart,
Yes,
from the will.
exactly. Yes,
from the desire
exactly.
to succeed, and not so much from the mind.
Yes,
That's quite different.
Yes, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
That is, mind has a part to play, or particularly the intellect has a part to play. We need to clearly distinguish what it is we are trying to know. But it's the driving force behind it is our will, the heart.
Okay, yes. Thank you so much.
Right.
The next question. In most other religions, in most other religious and spiritual traditions, we are told that having a human birth is a big gift. Does Ramana Maharshi see any value, point, or purpose in being human? Does ego and or having human birth serve any purpose whatsoever? I'm not asking about human as compared with animal birth, because I know Lakshmi the cow became enlightened. I'm asking if there's any value or purpose in having a human birth.
All value and purpose are judgments that we make. These are it's only with respect to ourself as ego that we say something has value or something has purpose. Because as ego, we are attached to this body, whatever the body may be, whether it's a human body or a cow body or a ant body or elephant body. That is when we all sentient beings experience themselves as a body. And because we identify that body as I, that body is of value to us. It seems that we attribute value to this body. So we all want to preserve our life in this body. So we cling on to life and we fear death. So this value that we attach to this body is a value attached to it by ourselves as ego. Because we take this body to be I, we value this body. And so long as we take ourselves to be this body, we have relatives, we have friends, we have acquaintances, and we value them because of their relationship to this body. We are more concerned about the well-being of our parents or our children or our husband or our wife than we are, for example, concerned about the welfare of complete strangers, because because of their relationship to us as the body. So all this value, generally people attach more value to human life than to animal life. They think it's okay to sacrifice an animal life to save a human life, for example. So, but this is all value that we give to things. And likewise about purpose. Purpose of any purpose that people ask, what is the purpose of this human life? And we try to find some purpose, but it's all only in the view of ourselves as ego. From the absolute standpoint, from the standpoint of the pure awareness that we actually are, nothing has any value or purpose, because in the view of the pure awareness that we actually are, what exists is only ourself. And it's beyond value or purpose, because what we actually are is ever existing, immutable. And so we can't say either it has value or it has purpose. It just is as it is. So when all talk of value and purpose is only from the perspective of ego. Does ego have any purpose? Does ego have any value? It seems to have, so long as we rise as ego, because this is what we mistake ourselves to be. But actually it has no value or purpose at all. In fact, this ego is the source of all our troubles. But still, because of our dense ignorance, we hold on to this individuality, this separate existence, which to us seems to be immeasurably valuable, but actually is just the source of all our troubles. So we need to go beyond seeking the value or purpose or anything. We need, what we are to seek is what actually is. But when we come to know what actually exists, we'll find that, well, Bhagavan has said very clearly in Nana, for example, Yatartamai Ulludu Atma Swarupamandre. What actually exists is only Atma Swarupa. So when we know ourselves as Atma Swarupa, as the pure being awareness, we will find that alone exists and nothing else. Other things don't, not only they don't have any value or purpose, they don't even have any existence of their own. All these things, all the phenomena that we're now aware of seem to have existence because they appear in our view. So it's only they derive their seeming existence from the seeming existence of ourself as ego. And we seem to be ego only in waking and dream, not in sleep. So ego is only the seeming existence of ego is temporary. Therefore, it is not real existence. That which really exists must always exist. So ultimately, nothing has any value or purpose. The only thing, nothing has any value or purpose because it doesn't even have any real existence. The only thing that has real existence is our self as Satchit, as pure being awareness. I hope that's an adequate answer to that question. I don't know whether the person who asked this question is here today or not.
I don't think the person wants to. There's a second question associated with this. That is verse 25 of Uludu Narpadu. Sorry, in verse 25 of Uludu Narpadu, Bhagwan said a demon is a formless phantom having no form or substance of its own. But could you please elaborate on what exactly that means in our daily world? Is a demon simply our own ignorance, or is it the ego grasping form to keep the person we take ourselves to be in a state of being fearful? Could one say that in our state of believing we're a person, we're all demons, given we identify as being something which doesn't even exist, something without real form or substance? Or are there some sort of beings in our projected world which are demonic or soulless, like narcissists and sociopaths, who have only the goal of spreading discord and fear, the way religions suggest? In other words, yes, ultimately we are all self, God, but within the parameters of this crazy ego projected world, who are demons?
Okay. What Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Ulanapadu is very, very clear. He describes ego as Uruvatra Pe Ahande. Uruvatra means formless. Pe means a demon. And Ahande means ego. So the formless demon ego. So the demon Bhagavan is talking about there is only ego. Why he describes it as ego? Because that is, when he describes, let's start with the first description of ego. He says it's formless. When he says ego is formless, that which is formless has no separate existence. So the only thing that has no separate existence, the only thing that is formless is Satchit, pure being awareness. That is what ego essentially is. That is that Satchit is what always shines as the self-shining being I am. Self-shining means it's self-aware, it's aware of its own being. So that pure awareness I am is what we actually are, and that is formless. But as ego, we attach ourselves to form, as Bhagavan explains in that verse. We identify ourselves with form. So it's this nature of ego to grasp form that makes ego into a demon. If it remained at the formless, pure awareness that it actually is, there'd be no problems. But it rises grasping form. But another important thing to understand about when Bhagavan says it's formless, that means it actually has no separate existence. Ego seems to have a separate existence only because it grasps form, taking a form of a body to be I. That's why he begins the verse by saying, Urupatri undu. Sorry. Urupatri undam. Grasping form, it comes into being. So ego has no separate existence. It seems to have a separate existence only because it grasps the form of a body as I. And it's also important to understand that body has no existence apart from ego, because as he says in the next verse, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. So that everything means all phenomena. So that includes the body. So as soon as we rise as ego, we project and identify a body as I. This all happens simultaneously. That's why Bhagavan says, grasping form, it comes into existence. That implies that as soon as it comes into existence, it grasps form. That it is coming into existence and its grasping form are not two separate things. And its grasping form entails projecting a form and grasping it as I. So he says, grasping form, it comes into being. Urupatri undam, grasping form, it comes into being. Urupatri nitkam, grasping form, it stands. That is, without grasping the form of a body as I, we cannot come into being as ego, and we cannot stand as ego. That means we cannot endure as ego. But having grasped the form of a body as I, we don't stop with that. We can, having taken this body to be I, we are then constantly grasping other forms. That's what he refers to in the third sentence when he says, Urupatri undu mika ongam. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes abundantly. That is, all phenomena are forms. The attention that we give to all those forms is what he describes as grasping form. So it is by attending to phenomena that ego feeds itself and is nourished. So the very nature of ego is constantly grasping form. This is what makes it demonic. The term that Bhagavan uses in Tamil for demon is pay, which is more or less equivalent to a Sanskrit term, pisasa. Pay or pisasa, they are demons who are, they have various characteristics. They're said to be flesh-eating demons in some, according to some accounts. They are also reputed to be demons who possess people. So it's that possessing attribute of the demon that Bhagavan, that is the reason why Bhagavan likens it to ego. Ego has possessed this body, so to speak. Not that the body has any existence independent of ego, but when we rise as ego, we project and possess a body as ourself. This is just like the demons possessing people. So this is the demonic quality that Bhagavan is alluding to when he uses this single word, pay, which means demon, to describe ego. So in its essential nature, ego is just formless, pure awareness. But by coming into existence as a separate entity, it comes into existence as a separate entity grasping a form. That is the demonic quality. I hope I've explained that clearly enough. So Bhagavan, in that verse, he's not talking about external demons. External demons are we need not be worried about. It's this demon that we now is this it's this I that is now attached to this body as I am this body. That is the demon Bhagavan is talking about. He's not talking about any other types of demon.
Sanjay, did you wanted to ask a question?
In the latest Q&A video, you say at one place, sex is a biological urge. It's a biological urge, not for the survival of this organism, but for the survival of this species. The urge for sex is for sustaining the life of the species. So we have a particularly strong desire for sex. It's hardwired into us. So my question is, who has this biological urge for the survival of the species? I can have an urge to have a son or children for the survival of my family lineage, but I do not have any biological urge for the survival of the species. So who exactly has this biological urge? Thank you, sir.
Well, all urges are for ego. Ego has this urge because it identifies the body as I. So that is the biology isn't designed just to sustain your family, your biological lineage. It's designed to sustain the species, whatever the species may be. Because we now identify a human body as I, we have this urge to reproduce. And that the effect of our reproducing, the effect of our having children, is we are thereby sustaining the species as a whole. Whether it's your children or someone else's children, so long as children are being born, the species will continue to endure. So when we talk about biological urge, we are talking from an external physical point of view. But why we are talking from that point of view? Because we have identified this body as I. This body is a biological organism. We have certain urges, like we have urge to eat food, to drink water, to breathe air. These are urges for the survival of this particular organism. We can survive very well without, we can't survive without food, water, and air. But we can survive very well without sex. So because sex is not for our own survival, but for the survival of the species, it is the way it is designed that we are made to have a very strong desire for that. Because if you think of it from a totally selfish point of view, why should we get married and have children? We can do very well on our own. When we get married and have children, it's an expensive affair. We have to support our children and we have to do all that. If we were totally selfish, we wouldn't be interested in reproducing. We'd be interested only in ourselves. But nature has designed us in such a way that we have this urge to reproduce. It's not only the gratification of, the urge to reproduce is not just about the sexual gratification. We're all happy when children are born, parents are happy. So we are just this biological organism is designed to reproduce. So that the whole, that's how nature goes on. So the problem lies, I mean, this is just the way nature works. That's not a problem. The problem lies in the fact that we identify this body as I. So the urges of this body are experienced by us as urges of, so we feel, we feel this strong desire, but the desire is rooted in our identification with the body. Reproducing is not a problem. Being married, having children, all that is not a problem. The problem is the desire that we have for that. That is why it's because any desire takes our attention outwards. So that is why often brahmacharya, at least for some time in one's life, is recommended. We need to curb our desires, not just because not to stop reproducing. We need to curb our desires so that the desires don't have control over us. If we don't curb our desires will control us. If we curb them, if we keep them in check, we at least maintain some control over them.
So we can say that urge to expand this species or to keep it alive, it's not our direct urge, but it's an overall urge of the nature, something like that.
It's an urge of the nature, but because we identify ourselves with one specimen of that nature, this body is a part of this whole web of nature, you can say. It's because we identify ourselves as a part of this, we have this urge to reproduce. And because children need protection, when children are young, they can't protect themselves. So we also have a very, as parents, we have a very strong attachment for our children, very strong urge to protect and to take care of the welfare of our children. This is all the way the nature works. But nothing is wrong with that at all. The problem is when we identify this body as I. So we feel I have this urge. These are all natural processes. This is the way the nature goes on. But because we have identified ourselves as part of this small part of this body, which is a tiny part of this whole web of life, we feel all these desires and so on. And because we have these desires, our attention goes outward, seeking gratification of the desires. That's why we need to wean our mind off all its desires, not just the desire for having children, the desire for having sexual gratification or whatever, all desires. We need to wean our mind off. And weaning the mind off desires is not an easy task, because we have, as Bhagavan says, these desires come from time the seeds that give rise to the desires are the vasanas, and these come from time immemorial. So why we have such strong Vishaya vasanas, such strong inclinations to experience Vishayas, is because of we've cultivated these desires over so many countless lives.
So basically, this biological urge or any other desire, it is there for no rhyme or reason. There's no logic behind this.
Well, that's what someone was asking in one of his earlier questions. What's the purpose of this? Ultimately, it has no purpose. But so long as we take ourselves to be a human being, all these things, everything seems to have a purpose. What's the purpose of eating? What's the purpose of breathing? What's the purpose of drinking water? It has no purpose at all. in the ultimate thing. But it seems to us to have a very important purpose, because if we don't breathe, if we don't drink water, if we don't eat food, this body which we now take to be ourselves is not going to live. So we attribute purpose to all these things. Yes, eating is very important. Living a healthy lifestyle is very important. All these things, it all seems important because our life in this body seems to us to be very important, because we take this body to be I.
So the relative to ego, all these things have purpose.
Everything is relative to ego.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
It's
you.
all a play of ego.
Thank you, sir.
Ego and its vasanas.
It seems so meaningless if once you go deeper into it.
It is ultimately meaningless.
Yeah, because to this species, why should we do it? If it is all Maya unreal, why should we have that urge?
Well, that is Maya.
Yeah, that is Maya.
Maya means she who is not.
Yeah.
But she who is not likes to seem to be, and so it all goes on. But that Maya, Bhagavan also often referred to Mana Maya. Mana Maya means Maya of a mind. Ultimately, this Maya is nothing but mind, in the sense of ego. So there's no Maya ultimately other than ego. That is why Bhagavan refers to it as a demon.
Thank you, sir.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
The next question is, what is the exact mechanism of burning the vasanas, one thought after another, in Fortress, for example, and how this is connected with the idea of Sadhu Om about a 100% turn? I'm not sure what in Fortress means.
I know. It's referring to an analogy Bhagavan uses in Nana, killing all the enemy as they come out of the fortress. The enemy in the fortress are the vasanas. The fortress is our heart, and the enemies in the fortress are the vasanas. Can you just ask the first part of the question again?
Yeah, the question is, what is the exact mechanism of burning the vasanas?
All right. Yes. Okay.
One thought after another.
Yes. That is, vasanas have no strength of their own. Vasanas are nothing but our own inclinations. So they have no strength of their own. They derive whatever strength they seem to have from us. How vasanas become strong is the more we allow ourselves to be swayed by any particular vasana, the stronger that vasana becomes. So, for example, some people have a strong inclination to smoke. How they have that strong inclination? Because when they were younger, they somehow fell into that habit. And because tobacco has an addictive quality, the more they smoke, the more that inclination to smoke increases. So this is why it's very difficult for people who've been smoking for some time to give up smoking, because the vasana is strong. But how you can overcome that vasana or any vasana is not by not allowing yourself to be swayed by it. So any vasana we have becomes strong to the extent to which we allow ourselves to be swayed by it, and it is weakened to the extent to which we refrain from being swayed by it. So Vishaya vasanas are our inclination to attend to Vishayas. That's Vishayas means objects or phenomena. So the inclination to attend to anything other than ourselves is a Vishaya vasana. When we practice self-investigation, we are trying to attend only to ourselves. So, but as we are trying to hold on to ourselves, to hold on to self-attentiveness, the vasanas are constantly rising. Bhagavan refers to them as they're rising in countless numbers like ocean waves. So throughout the waking and dream state, vasanas are constantly rising, trying to draw our attention to this or that. So if we allow our attention to go outwards, we are yielding ourselves to the sway of the vasanas, and thereby we are nourishing the vasanas. But if instead of allowing our attention to go towards anything else, if we hold on to, if we attend only to ourselves, in other words, if we hold on to the self-attentiveness, we are thereby refraining from being swayed by the Vishaya vasanas. So the more we hold on to self-attentiveness, the more the inclination to hold on to self-attentiveness will grow strong, and all the other inclinations, all the other vasanas will be weakened. So the most effective way to weaken Vishaya vasanas is to hold on to self-attentiveness. It's not the only way, because you can weaken vasanas by other means. For example, by practicing devotion to a particular name or form of God. You try to keep your mind fixed on that name or form of God. Thereby you're resisting the inclination to attend to other things. And so other vasanas are weakened. That's why practicing devotion to a name or form of God is an effective means to purify the mind. The impurities in the mind are the Vishaya vasanas. So the more we weaken our Vishaya vasanas, the purer the mind becomes. But we can weaken the Vishaya vasana only to a certain extent by meditating on God as a name or form. A name or form means something other than ourselves. But as Bhagavan says in verse 8 of Upadesha Shundya, rather than Anyabhava, Anyabhava means meditating on God. In that context, it means meditating on God as Anya, as something other than ourselves. And Anyabhava, meditating on Him as nothing other than ourselves, in which He is I, that is with the understanding that He is I, if we meditate on nothing other than I, that is anaitinamutum. That's the best among all. That means that's the most effective means to purify the mind. In other words, it's the most effective means to weaken the Vishaya vasanas. Because so long as we're meditating on God as a name or form, that name or form is a Vishaya. It's something other than ourselves. It's an object or a phenomenon. That is an effective means to weaken other Vishaya vasanas. So it's a very effective way to purify the mind, but it can only lead to a certain extent. By purifying the mind by attending to a name or form of God, the mind is, as the mind becomes purer, that's as the Vishaya vasanas lose their strength, the mind becomes clarified. And the more the mind is clarified, the more it will understand God cannot be, God is the infinite whole. So since He's infinite, nothing can be other than Him. So I cannot have any existence separate from God. So what I take to be I is nothing but God Himself. So that clarity dawns, and then we get that love to attend to God who is ever shining in our heart as our own being. So that is the most effective way to purify the mind. Purify the mind means to weaken the Vishaya vasanas. And by attending to ourself, we are sat, we are pure being. So by attending to ourself means attending to our being, we are increasing the sat vasana, the inclination to attend to our being and thereby to be as we actually are. That sat vasana is what is called bhakti. It's the highest form of bhakti called swatma bhakti, love for one's own self. because one's own self is nothing other than God. So about the analogy Bhagavan gives of the enemy coming out of a fortress, when we try to hold on to self-attentiveness, the vasanas are constantly rising. That is what Bhagavan refers to as the enemy coming out of a fortress. How we cut them down is by not allowing ourselves to be swayed by them. So long as we are holding on to self-attentiveness, we are thereby cutting down the enemy as and when they come out of a fort. That is, the vasanas are weakened to the extent to which we refrain from being swayed by them. By holding on to self-attentiveness, we are thereby refraining from being swayed by any Vishaya vasana, any inclination to attend to anything else.
But then, Michael, why Sadhu Om talks about one shot, 100% turn which we have to make?
Okay.
This is, in this context, is my question.
Okay, right. I forgot about that part of the question, yes. Our aim in self-investigation is to turn our entire attention back to ourselves. But there is a force that is resisting our turning our attention back to ourselves. That force is our Vishaya vasanas. So when we start off from this path, we're obviously not able to turn the full 180 degrees. We may be able to turn 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees. Of course, we shouldn't take this literally. This is just a way of describing that the number of degrees we turn. It means the extent to which we focus our attention on ourselves, thereby withdrawing it from everything else. So the more we attend to ourselves, the stronger the Satvasana will become, and the weaker the Vishaya vasanas will become. As the Satvasana becomes stronger and the Vishaya vasanas become weaker, we're able to attend to ourselves more and more keenly. In other words, we're able to turn closer to the full 180 degrees. And when the Sattvasana becomes stronger than all the Vishaya vasanas combined, then we will turn the full 180 degrees. And that is when ego is annihilated. And when ego is annihilated, obviously all its vasanas are annihilated with it. The vasanas have no separate existence. The vasanas are not ego, but their ego's vasanas, and the very nature of ego is to have vasanas. So only when ego is destroyed are all the vasanas destroyed entirely. But in order to destroy ego, we need to weaken the Vishaya vasanas to a considerable extent. And we weaken them to the extent to which we cultivate the Sattvasana, the love to attend to ourselves. Has that adequately answered your question?
Yes, thank you. But so the problem is in the end about the quality of our inquiry. But okay, let's say that we managed to get this 100% turn. What is happening then with all other vasanas? Because they are innumerable.
Yes,
they're going to be burned in an instant.
Yes, they'll all be burned because if you cut the root of a tree, the whole tree will die. The ego is the root. The vasanas are just the branches and leaves. So in order to get at the root, we have to trim back the branches. If you've got a very thick bush, you can't root it out without first trimming all the branches and leaves so you can get at the root. But you cannot get rid of the plant entirely until you cut the root.
So it's not supposed that we have to slay all the enemies in the fortress. So
we need
it's enough to clear the space.
Yes, clear the space so that we can enter the fortress. The fortress is our own heart. So we have to enter the fortress. The enemy coming out of what is preventing us from entering the fortress. When we slay sufficient of them, then we're able to enter and take possession of the fortress. That entering and taking possession of the fortress is what is called turning 180 degrees. Because when we turn 180 degrees, that means our entire attention is focused on ourself alone. So when our entire attention is focused on ourself alone, it's thereby withdrawn from all other things. So when we turn 180 degrees, we're aware of nothing other than ourselves. The state of being aware of nothing other than ourselves is pure awareness. So as soon as we experience ourselves as pure awareness, we cease to be ego. That is how ego is annihilated.
So basically, it's a matter of starving. We are starving from our attention. Our attention is coming back to itself.
That is the real fasting. Bhagavan often used to say, we need not fast this body. It's mind or ego that we need to fast. Stop giving it all this experience of Vishayas.
Thank you, Michael.
All right.
The next question is, lately I am no longer able to continue with my sadhana. It feels I am drifting away from Bhagavan. No specific worry or stress though. What can I do to overcome this, please?
Well, it's very important that we think deeply about these things. That is, when we find we are losing interest in Bhagavan's teachings, it means we're taking interest in other things. Because it's the nature of mind to be interested in something. So if we're losing interest in Bhagavan's teaching, it's because we're taking too much interest in other things. But what are we going to gain from our interest in other things? Ultimately, all these are just fleeting appearances. Whatever we may experience in this life, it appears and it disappears. Nothing in this life is permanent. Even this body that we take to be ourselves, this is impermanent. When this body dies, we'll be completely cut off from this identity that we have now. And along with being cut off from this identity, we'll be cut off from everything else that we now consider as ours, or we'll be cut off from our identity, our memories, everything. So what is the point of whatever we may achieve in this world? Even if we amass huge wealth, even if we gain political power, even if we gain name and fame, even if whatever our interest may be, even if we take that to the absolute extreme, if we're very interested, for example, in science or some form of learning, we can go on studying, or doing research and learning more and more and more. But one day we're going to have to forget it all when this body dies. So what is the point of all these things? And do we want to, if we die, that is, if this body dies before we die, we die means we as ego die, then we're going to be born again, again, and again. There's no end to this process until we put an end to ego. So we need to think carefully about all these things. We need to assess why we are taking interest in all these external things. When ultimately none of these things are going to, they may give us some fleeting, they may seem to give us some fleeting pleasures, some small joys of life, but it's all fleeting. Nothing's going to last. So we need to ask ourselves, what do we really want? Do we just want to waste away our time in this body, on experiencing fleeting phenomena, or do we want to find out something more lasting, more real? The only thing that is truly lasting, that is truly real, is our own being. So in this way, by thinking about these things, we should try to restore the interest that we now find is waning. That's why constantly keeping our mind dwelling on Bhagavan's teachings is very, very important, because that will sustain our motivation to continue trying to investigate ourselves and thereby surrender ourselves.
Understood. Thank you, Michael.
Right.
The next question. Sadhu Natanand Anand, in his book Spiritual Instructions, says that self-inquiry is suitable only for ripe souls. The rest should follow different methods according to the state of their minds. Can you please elaborate on this? How does one know about the ripeness of their minds?
Right. Okay. He himself told me about this, because I asked him about this, and he said that is, it's not he who said this. He asked Bhagavan, and the answer given by Bhagavan, this is only for ripe souls. Other paths are suitable for other people who are not who are not ready for this. So what he told me is, when he asked that question, he recorded that answer. But then after some time, he asked Bhagavan, none of the other paths that you mention have any appeal to me. The only path I'm interested in is this path of Atma-vichara. Bhagavan laughed and said, well, now you yourself see. But it's this, so long as you're satisfied with other means, you'll continue doing those other means. But a time will come, whatever other path you may follow, you will eventually become dissatisfied with it, because no other path will give you the eternal happiness you are seeking. So all those other paths, they're good for purifying the mind and everything. But when the mind is purified, we'll come to understand the inadequacy of all these other means. They're good, they're necessary in order to purify the mind. But once we've achieved a certain degree of purification of mind, these other methods have served their purpose. Then nothing other than Atma-vichara will appeal to us. So what Natyananda said, the very fact that that he said, Bhagavan often won't. Bhagavan will often answer in an indirect way in order to make us understand for ourselves. So in that case, Bhagavan gave me that answer to make me understand that that none of the other paths have any appeal to me. So then I understood. This is that's what he thereby made me understand that this is the path that is meant for me. So he said, do not be discouraged by that. He said when he recorded that, that was in the very early days that he asked those questions and recorded and compiled Upadesha Manjari. But he said since then, so many things Bhagavan has made clear to him. But he said Bhagavan has a very subtle way of teaching, but a very, very effective way of teaching. So if the very Bhagavan also, Bhagavan made it clear, if we are attracted to this path of self-investigation, that means we have sufficient maturity for it. If this doesn't appeal to us at all, if we're more interested in puja or japa or murti, meditation on some name or form of God, or if we're more interested in yoga or so many all these various other paths, if they appeal to us more, that is because we are still at that level. When these things lose their attraction and we're only interested in this path of self-investigation, that means that we have the requisite maturity for it. There's no use in telling people to practice self-investigation when they're not attracted to it. That's why in Gita, for example, Krishna gave many different teachings. Krishna, in many verses, he emphasizes, fix your mind on self alone. There's so many verses in Gita where he's saying that, but he's also given so many other teachings because he knows some people will be attracted to this, other people will be attracted to other paths, according to the maturity of their mind. When Yogananda asked Bhagavan what teaching should be given for the uplift of the masses, Bhagavan laughed and said, teaching cannot be given en masse. Teaching has to be according to the taught. So there's no one teaching that will suit everyone. Just like a mother will not feed her newborn child the same food she's giving to her teenage child. She feeds each one according to the needs of their body at that time. So likewise, Vedanta is like a mother to all of us. Vedanta is not, right? It is a single. It is single in one sense, but it provides something for everyone to help each person at their particular level of spiritual development. But ultimately, we all have to come to the ultimate practice, which is investigating and knowing what we actually are. As Krishna says in Gita, Atma samsta mana kritva na kinchit abhichintayat. Fix your mind on self, do not think of anything else. That is what we're all working towards. But not everyone is ready even to try to do that. The fact that we are drawn to Bhagavan's teachings means that we already have been through all these other ways, and now Bhagavan's teachings is what appeals to us. Therefore, that is what is we are fit for this path.
So this, I think, so I think this is a question in the sense that the questioner would like to have a response on this particular statement. And it begins, Michael, I apologize for everything. In my ignorance, it seems I've stumbled upon a very particular mistake, one that compels me to investigate certain mysterious, strange, and unsettling events and phenomena that I witness in the world and in my own life, sometimes fascinating, at other times terrifying. My mistake lies in pausing to analyze them and try to find an explanation, cause, effect, what logic they have, why they occur, and so on. And the worst part is, it seems I find one, and unfortunately I begin to imagine that I understand certain hidden things, which are actually not good to know. Firstly, because they aren't real, although they seem real, very much so, and they're frightening. Now I'm starting to realize that they are all superimpositions on the screen of reality, that these phenomena, even though they seem very real, are like magic tricks. But it seems that I have a kind of addiction or grasping hold on them because of the fear.
Okay. Yes. This is the nature of Vishaya Vasanas. That is, because of our strength of Vishaya, it's our Vishaya Vasanas that make us that make us interested in phenomena of various kinds. I mean, there's so many different types of phenomena. So according to our particular set of Vishaya vasanas, what things that interest one person may not interest another person. But whatever it is, whatever knowledge we gain about anything other than our own being is, as you say, none of it is real. It's all just a superimposition. It's all just a dream. So we need to wean our mind off its interest in all other things. And how we wean our mind off its interest in other things is by cultivating more and more interest to know what we ourselves actually are. That is, all other mysteries are insignificant. They're trivial mysteries. The greatest mystery of all is, who am I? To know what we actually are. If we know what we actually are, then all problems are solved. Whatever else we may know is of no value whatsoever. As Bhagavan says in Atma-vichara, what is the use of knowing everything else if one doesn't know oneself? And if oneself is known, what else is there to know? So we need to wean our mind off the interest it takes in other things and cultivate more and more interest to investigate ourself alone, to know what we actually are, to know who am I. This is again what I was saying earlier, but Bhagavan said, the whole of this spiritual path is a battle within our own will, between our Vishaya vasanas and our Sattvasana. That is our inclination to know about so many other things, to experience so many other things, and our inclination to know and to be what we actually are.
Next question is, when one of the Swamis at the Ramakrishna Center I attended passed away, I chose not to attend the funeral because this function seems somewhat petty when we know we're not this physical body. However, for not experiencing the emotion of sadness and a want to attend the service, I wonder if I'm antisocial or lacking in sympathy. What do you think of this?
It's who am I to judge? Sometimes attending funerals is a good thing to do because it reminds us of our own mortality. But as to your particular motives for not attending the funeral, I mean, why should you even be concerned about it? The funeral has happened, you didn't attend it, it's over now. So what is past is past. Let's not think about that. And whether you're antisocial or whatever it is, so what? This is all to do with the non-self. We are not here. That our aim is not to become a perfect person. Our aim is to find out what we actually are. There's no such thing as a perfect person. As a person, we have so many shortcomings and defects. That's just the nature of being a person. But our aim in this path is to investigate what we actually are. This person is what we seem to be, but it is not what we actually are. So all the particular traits of this person, the inclination to be social or antisocial, all these things, this is all anatma. It's all things other than ourselves. So let us not take part, let us not engage in Atma-vichara, investigation of things other than ourselves. Let us investigate ourself alone. So it's best to put all such thoughts out of the mind and investigate to whom do all these thoughts occur.
The next question. In Yoga Vashishta, it is said that if one comes, that is, becomes a devotee, gets initiated, etc., to a jnani, then one can attain liberation in 4 or 5 births. I do not know the exact verse, though. Has Sri Bhagwan mentioned anything to this effect?
In fact, I put a quote there. It's from Namali Swami, and it's very well explained, his point.
I'll just read it out. The quote that this question was referring to, the particular passage from Yoga Vashishta, Milan is saying that its source is conversations with Annamalai Swami, seeds. The question is, even if such people didn't understand Bhagwan's teachings and didn't try to follow them, didn't they get a little benefit just from being near him? Perhaps their physical association with Bhagwan will bear fruit in some future life. Answer. Yes, this is true. In Yoga Vashishta, it is said that one who gets association with a jnani will gain mukti in only 4 or 5 lifetimes. These people were associated with Bhagwan physically and were made aware of his teachings, even if they didn't believe or practice them. These teachings are like seeds that will begin to sprout when the time and the circumstances are right.
Yes, Bhagavan certainly wouldn't say anything like 4 or 5 births. It may be said like that in the Yoga Vashishta to encourage people or whatever. I don't know, but we shouldn't be concerned about how many births we're going to have or anything. But the fact is, having association with Bhagavan in any form, whether being physically in his presence or coming to know about his teachings or seeing his picture, these things will all have an effect on our mind. How much effect they have, it depends upon our pakva, our maturity. As Bhagavan said, if you put a that is a banana. Bananas grow on a plant which has a very a, a stem which is full of moisture. So if you put a banana plant on a fire, it will take some time to burn. Whereas if you put dry wood on a fire, it will burn much quicker. And if you put gunpowder on the fire, it will burn immediately. So it all depends. That is, Bhagavan is a great raging fire of jnana. But how quickly association with him will consume us entirely depends upon our pakva, our maturity, our ripeness. But nobody can come in contact with Bhagavan and not ultimately be benefited by it. It's just a matter of time. It may be 1 lifetime, it may be 20 lifetimes, that doesn't matter. It may be instant, it all depends. But the fact is, coming in contact with Bhagavan, not just in his physical presence, but coming to know about him, coming to know about his teachings. And of course, the deeper we go into his teachings, the stronger the effect. It will definitely benefit all concerned. Let's not worry about how many births or anything like that. Our aim, if we're following Bhagavan's path, is to know who am I here and now. So let's not think about the past or the future or anything. Let us focus on attending to ourselves here and now, unmindful of. Let it be 1 birth. Let it be. Let the annihilation of ego occur the next minute. Let it occur after 100 lifetimes. That need not concern us. Our only concern is, who am I here and now?
Next question. I can see the difference between the thinker and the light by which thinking occurs. Then the mind imagines that someday thinking will cease, but I am not there yet. I feel there's nothing more I can do other than wait. Do you agree? Or am I going about the inquiry wrongly?
Simply waiting is not going to achieve anything. We need to keep our attention on the thinker or on the light that illumines the thinker. Ultimately, it's one and the same. What seems to be a thinker is actually, if we attend to the thinker, namely ego, we will see that it is nothing but the light. So our aim should be to keep our attention on ourselves as much as possible. If we Otherwise, if we just say we just wait, our attention will be going outwards. When our attention is going outwards, we're not going to see the results we're waiting for. We will see the result we're waiting for only when we keep our attention turned inwards more and more and more. So we should try our best to be self-attentive. Everything else will take care of itself. One other thing, when you say you can understand that you can see the difference between the thinker and the light that illumines it, we can understand conceptually the difference, but in actual practice, the thinker is the pure I mixed and conflated with adjuncts. The light is the pure I in its pristine state, in its state of purity. They're one and the same thing. The difference arises, or a difference appears, because the thinker is mixed, the thinker means ego, is mistaking itself to be something else. But essentially, the thinker is nothing but that light. That is, if you remove all the adjuncts, the extraneous things, what remains is that light alone. So that is the essence, the heart of the thinker, the reality of the thinker. And that is what we need to attend to.
The next question. So this is life. It's about basking in our being, just living from our presence, our self, our heart, and living spontaneously, and then seeing how life is playing then. It's a question.
Living spontaneously refers to the external living. We are not to live spontaneously, we are just to be as we are. So this part is not about the external life, whether we live spontaneously or anything. There's some underlying reality to all this. Whether we're living spontaneously or non-spontaneously, it doesn't matter. What is the underlying reality? It's not how we live, but what we are. We're investigating not anything external. We're investigating just our own being. Who am I? It's that being which we're investigating. Let's not be concerned about anything else.
The next question. Dear Michael, can we get the effect when practicing self-inquiry, when being active, the same as we would be of meditating alone in silence? Cause for meditation, we must sit in silence, possibly alone and still. Since this is not always possible, can we get the effect of meditating if we practice self-inquiry when among other people, walking in public, and on the bus, etc.? The second question, if we earnestly practice self-inquiry, can we get connected with the inner guru? Since Bhagavan's darshan is no longer possible, is it possible to connect to the inner guru with self-inquiry and thus receive direct guidance from the divine? I felt many times when practicing self-inquiry to reach the point where I cannot progress any further with self-effort. Is it possible to get help from the divine? Is it possible to get the help of divine grace to progress further towards the self when I arrive at the wall with self-effort and cannot progress any further? Do we receive grace for final self-realization? Because I experienced many times I cannot get there just with self-effort.
Okay, sorry, that was a lot. When it's a long question like that, I tend to lose the thread. Can you read the first part of the question first, and then I'll answer that, and then we'll go on to the second part.
Yes. Dear Michael, can we get the effect of practicing self-inquiry when being active, just as we would if meditating alone in silence? Because for meditation, we must sit in silence, possibly alone and still. Since this is not always possible, can we get the effect of meditating if we practice self-inquiry when among people, or walking in public, or on the bus, and so on?
Yes.
That's
Okay. What is it that is active? It is the mind, the speech, and the body that are active. These are all instruments of action. None of these are what we actually are. So in self-investigation, our aim is to hold on to our being, unmindful of the actions of mind, speech, and body. So we need to turn our entire attention back towards our being. Obviously, when the mind, speech, and body are engaged in activity, we tend to be distracted by that activity. But even if we sit without any activity and close our eyes, still our mind is distracted by its interest in other things. So ultimately, it doesn't matter whether the mind, speech, and body are active or not. What matters is our attention. Whether our attention is on anything other than ourselves or on ourselves alone. So when Bhagavan defined what he meant, what is meant by Atma-vichara, he defined it as sadakalamum manate atma-vil vaitirapadu. That is always keeping the mind on oneself. Keeping the mind on oneself means keeping the attention on oneself. And he said sadakalamum, always. So our aim should be to always keep our attention on ourselves. We may not succeed in that, but that is what we should be working towards. So whether the mind, speech, and body are active or inactive, we need to try to attend to ourselves. We may find that we're able to go deeper within when we are not, when the mind, speech, and body are inactive. But ultimately, it doesn't matter whether they're active or not. What matters is where our attention is going, whether our attention is on ourselves or on other things. Truly speaking, nothing requires our attention, because even the activities of the mind, speech, and body, if we are wholly interested in attending to ourselves, we will not thereby be engaging in any agamya, that is, any action driven by our will. But whatever actions the body, speech, and mind need to go through in order for the prarabdha to unfold, it will be, the mind, speech, and body will be driven by God to do those actions. So truly speaking, no action requires our attention. If we go deep in this path, we can have our whole attention on ourselves. whether the mind, speech, body are active or inactive. We haven't yet, most of us haven't yet reached that state. So it may be beneficial sometimes to, when we're not engaged in other activities, to try to go deeper within, by trying to focus our attention more one-pointedly on ourselves. But we will not be able to go deep within at such times unless we are trying to hold on to self-attentiveness as much as possible throughout the day, whatever be the activities of the mind, speech, and body. So the crucial thing is attending to ourselves. The more we attend to ourselves, the deeper we'll be able to go within. So merely just trying to go deep within, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, morning and evening of meditation. That's not going to take us very far. Throughout the day, whatever be the activities, we need to try to keep our attention on ourselves as much as possible. Only then will we be able to go deeper within when we are free of other activities. I hope that's a clear answer to that part of the question. So what was the second part of the question?
Yeah, the second part is
about the inner guru and grace.
Yeah. The second question is, if we are earnestly practicing self-inquiry, can we become connected with the inner guru? Since Bhagwan's darshan is no longer possible, is it possible to connect to the inner guru with self-inquiry and thus receive direct guidance from the divine? I've felt many times.
Can I answer that bit first, and then we can go on to the rest? It's not just possible. If we are attending to ourselves, that itself is contacting the inner guru. The inner guru is nothing but our own being. So attending to our being is the only way to contact the inner guru. We cannot attend to our being without thereby contacting the inner guru, because the inner guru is our own being. So that is the very nature of, that's why Bhagavan said, Guru appears externally, in an external form, only to tell us the term within. But the real form of Guru is not the external form of Guru, but our own Swarupa, our own reality, that which is shining in our heart as I am. That is what we need to attend to. And when we say getting guidance, we're not going to, the inner guru isn't going to tell us, do this, don't do that. What happens is the more we attend to our being, the more our mind is thereby purified and clarified. That clarity that clarity in which we immerse ourselves when we are attending to ourselves, that clarity of the guru, that will automatically guide us without words. It'll guide us in silence. So the fact that we didn't have the good fortune to have Bhagavan's, well, who knows? We don't know what about our previous life, but at least in this life, most of us haven't had the good fortune to see Bhagavan in his human form. We were not, most of us nowadays were not even born when the time that he left his body. But that is not what is I mean, that is obviously, it's a great good fortune, those who were with Bhagavan, but Bhagavan knows what is best for us. So it's not essential to have his physical association. What is important is that mentally we are associated with him. So keeping our mind dwelling on his teachings is a better form of satsanga than merely being in his physical presence. And better than keeping our mind dwelling on his teachings is keeping our mind dwelling on ourselves, which is what all his teachings are pointing towards. Because keeping our mind fixed on ourselves is true, that is the best satsanga. Bhagavan often said, Sat means being. There's no being other than our own being. So attending to our own being, that is the best of all forms of satsanga. Second to that is mental satsanga, associating with the guru mentally by dwelling on his teachings or meditating on his name and form or whatever it is. Third best form is to be physically in his presence. But so we shouldn't feel we've missed anything just because we weren't physically present. What is important is to keep our mind dwelling on his teachings and to try to put his teachings into practice by attending to our own being. By attending to our own being, we thereby gain clarity. That clarity itself is his grace. That clarity is the light that will guide us. That clarity is the silence, but it is his true form, his swarupa, and his real teachings. I think I'd probably answer the rest of the question, but if you like to read the rest.
Yes, I'll just read the rest out. Yeah. Okay. I felt many times when practicing self-inquiry to reach the point where I cannot progress any further with self-effort. Is it possible to get help of divine grace to progress further towards the self when I arrive at the wall with self-effort and cannot progress any further? Do we receive grace for final self-realization? Because I experienced many times that I cannot get there just with self-effort.
Get where? Where are we trying to progress? We are just trying to know ourselves as we actually are. So there's no place to go to. All we need to do is to keep our attention fixed on ourselves as much as possible. The very fact that our attention is fixed on ourselves is the fruit of grace. It's only by grace that we have that inclination to try to attend to ourselves. It's by grace alone that we succeed in attending to ourselves. And by attending to ourselves, we are, so to speak, opening our heart to the grace. So the grace will flood in and consume us entirely. Everything is all, as Bhagavan said, grace is the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's grace that draws us to this path. It's grace that makes us commence on this path. It's grace that motivates us to continue on this path. And it is grace that will eventually swallow us. So it's all his grace. We should never feel that his grace is lacking. What is all that is required is that we attend to him ever shining in our heart as our own being. By attending to him, we are thereby yielding to his grace, because the nature of grace is always to pull our mind inwards. So when we try to turn our mind inwards, we are thereby yielding ourselves to the inward pull of his grace. So it's all his grace only. The very fact that we're interested in following this path, the very fact that we're trying to follow this path, it's all only by his grace. And we need not think that we have to get anywhere. All we need to do is to attend to ourselves. The more we attend to ourselves, the more we will subside. And when we subside completely, we will thereby be swallowed by him. So we shouldn't think that we're hitting a wall or something. It's not a wall. All we're attending to is our own being. There's nothing. That is the only thing that is real. That is his grace. That is Bhagavan himself. That is his silence. That is his teaching. That is everything. So all we need to do is to attend to our own being. Bhagavan said, there's a verse in Guru Vachakavai, the final two lines are Upayamum Tane, Upayamum Tane, Abedama Kanga Ave. That means the goal, or what we're aiming for, is only ourself. the upaya, the means, is only ourself. See that these are non-different. So if we think we're hitting we're up against the wall and not making progress, we haven't really understood what is happening. We are not trying to progress anywhere. We are just trying to hold our attention on ourselves and thereby to subside back into our being as our being.
Next question. Michael, you say that when the ego rises, it identifies or grabs a form or forms, but there is no substance to those forms other than in the experience of the ego. Is Bhagavan saying that the ego projects forms and is responsible for those forms, and at the same time, then bizarrely grabs those forms, which it itself is actually responsible for, as if they were different from itself? It does seem confusing that forms have no pre-existence outside the ego, and yet the ego is only real to the extent that it has grabbed hold of a form for which it is responsible. This seems like one of those perplexing chicken and egg problems.
Consider dream. Nothing in dream has any existence apart from the dreamer. As the dreamer, we project a dream body, which we take to be ourself, and through the five senses of that dream body, we see a dream world. Everything is only our own projection. But the projection, part of the process of projection is our identifying ourselves with one among the many forms. In a dream, we see so many forms, but one of those forms, the form of the dream body, is what we experience as ourself. There are so many other bodies we see in dream that are just like this body, but they are experienced as others, whereas this body is experienced as I. So what happens in dream is exactly what's happening now. It's all our own projection. The root of this projection is our rising as ego. When we rise as ego, we simultaneously project and identify form as I, the form of this body as I. It is, you say it's only real insofar as it's not real at all. It seems to be real, but that is what is actually real is only I. But when we rise as ego, we identify a body as I. So ego is that which is aware of itself as I am this body. What is real in ego is only the pure awareness I am. The adjunct, this body, is wholly unreal, as is the resulting conflation. I am this body, that is wholly unreal. What is real is only the I am. That is ego. There's an element of reality in ego, but as a mixture of that element of reality and the element of unreality, the chit and the jada, the I am and the body, the conflation, ego is wholly unreal, though it has an element of reality in it. So it's that reality that we need to hold on to. And by holding on to that reality, we withdraw our attention from everything else. And so eventually we dissolve back into that reality, our own being. And that alone remains, as it always is.
Can I just ask, because I asked the
Yes.
question,
Yes.
is the ego then completely creating the form world?
Yes.
And at the same time identifying with it simultaneously? Is it
Yeah.
creating it and identifying it?
It's
That's
all
the confusing bit.
it's a simultaneous process.
Right.
That's why it's called simultaneous creation, Yugapat Srishti. It
Right.
happens simultaneously. That is, some people say, by grasping form, ego comes into existence. Obviously, ego has to exist to grasp form. So that Bhagavan doesn't say by grasping form. He simply says, grasping form, it comes into existence. That implies it's a simultaneous process. As soon as we rise as ego, we project a body and identify it as I.
Right. So it's grabbing the very form it itself has created.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
All forms it has created, it grabs one of those forms.
Yeah.
Because now the entire universe is created by ego, but only this tiny little body is what it's mistaking to be I.
Yeah.
It's the same in any dream. In a dream is not like sitting in a cinema. In a cinema, you sit there and you watch everything happening on the screen. You're separate from it. But in a dream, you're a part of the dream. That is why, though the dream is our own creation, we have no control over what's happening in dream, because we don't experience ourselves as the creator of the dream. We experience ourselves as a creature within the dream.
Right. So then the whole thing is to work backwards and see yourself as the creator of the dream.
Well, don't even see yourself as a creator. See yourself as you actually are, because what you actually are is not even the creator.
No, but ultimately you are. Ultimately, you are creating the dream. Yeah.
Well, by rising as
ego,
by rising as ego, we're creating it or projecting it. But what we actually are is not that rising, creating ego. It is the being I am. But that is what we actually are.
Is this almost like when we create the world of forms? Is this almost like falling in love with your own mirror image? Is that what the ego is doing?
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. But in some, I think there's a verse in Guru Vachakakavai where Bhagavan uses the analogy of a monkey in front of a mirror.
Yeah.
It sees a monkey there, and it's wondering who is this monkey. But it snarls at the monkey, and the monkey in the mirror snarls back, and our response to this world is exactly like this. The whole world is nothing but a reflection of our own vasanas.
Right.
So we need to learn to stop liking or disliking this world. As Bhagavan said, likes and dislikes are both fit to be disliked.
Right. So to take that analogy of the monkey in the mirror, it's like the knower and the known are trapped in that sequence.
Yes. Well, the one who's trapped is the knower, because the known is the known exists only in the view of the knower.
Right. So then it's identifying with the known is what's trapping it.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you for that.
That's why in verse 24 of Uludanapudu, Bhagavan says, among the other terms he used to describe ego, he says it's this samsara. This whole samsara is nothing but ego. Ego itself is what has created all this and what is consequently caught up in it all.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much.
Right. But the way out is so easy, because the ego has within itself the seed of its own destruction. The seed of its own destruction is its own being. If it turns back to see who am I, it thereby ceases to be ego and remains as the pure awareness that it always actually is. Right. But because of our attachment to all these things, we are unwilling to turn. We turn a little bit, but we're not really turning deep enough within to lose ourselves completely. But with practice, it will come.
Michael, are we saying that projection is not good word to be used, because we use this example of projection a lot in Advaita, but projections presuppose the projector first. Even in an instant, it is we have time. It's not simultaneous. In projection, you need first ego in order to project the word. And this a little bit, we are going to Srishti Drishti.
Well, no. We need to be clear about this. In the 5th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan says, among all the thoughts in the mind, the thought called I is the first thought. Only after this rises, all other thoughts rise. Only after the first person rises, second and third persons arise. Without the first person, second and third persons do not exist. So there he says ego, it comes first. In other places, he says it all happens simultaneously. For example, in verse 7 of Uludunapadu, he says, though the awareness, here he's referring to ego as the awareness, because it's the awareness that knows the world, though awareness and the world rise and subside simultaneously, it is by awareness alone that the world shines. As I say, awareness there refers to ego. So there he said it happens simultaneously. So is there a contradiction between those two passages? No. When he says ego comes first, he's referring to the causal sequence. When he says it happens simultaneously, he's referring to chronological sequence. That is, there's such a thing as simultaneous causation. If, for example, if a car crashes into a tree, the car is thereby damaged, and the tree also may be damaged. The damage occurs as a result of the crash, but it occurs simultaneous with the crash. So in causal sequence, the crash is the cause, and the damage to the tree and the car are the effect. But in terms of chronological sequence, they happen simultaneously. So it's a matter of simultaneous causation. Ego is the cause. So in that sense, it comes first. But chronologically, it happens simultaneously. Is that distinction clear?
No, I have to think.
Just think of the analogy I use. A car crashes into a tree. The crash is the cause. The effect, it occurs simultaneously with the cause. As soon as the crash occurs, the damage occurs. But in which it's not the damage that caused the crash, it's the crash that caused the damage. So though they occur simultaneously, in terms of the causal sequence, the crash is the cause of the damage. So when Bhagavan says ego only after ego rises, everything else rises, he's referring to the causal sequence. That is, ego is the cause, everything else is the effect. But when he said that they occur simultaneously, he's referring to it chronologically, they occur simultaneously, even though ego is the cause and all other thoughts, all phenomena are the effect. That is, as I say, that's why it's called simultaneous creation, Yugapat Srishti. And that means the arising of the creating ego and the creative world occurs simultaneously. The arising of the projector and the projection occurs simultaneously.
I don't know what to say, because basically in this example, we are here and we are looking at the example. So there is somebody to be there. But in Drishti Shrishti, there is nobody to look outside and to say that ego is the first and then everything is the second.
Drishti Shrishti means that the seeing and the creation are simultaneous. There's no creation independent of the seeing. So the one who is creating and seeing is ego. So why it is simultaneous? Where are we projecting this world? We are projecting it in our awareness. So our awarenesses of it, our seeing it, and our creating it are simultaneous. So a root cause is ego, who is the projector and the seer. In dream, we simultaneously project and experience the dream world, because where we're projecting it is in our awareness. And it has no existence independent of our awareness of it, our perception of it.
Yes, but if upon investigation there is seeing, there is not seeing, there is a realization that ego doesn't exist by definition, we
Yes.
have to give
Yes.
everything to Shakti. So basically, Shakti is the main problem here.
What
not,
is
ego.
Shakti? The Shakti you're talking about is Maya. That Maya is nothing but ego. Ego
Yes.
is the Shakti that is creating all this and that is seeing it all. We seem to be egos so long as we are projecting and seeing all this. Instead of looking at the projection, if we look back at ourselves to see who am I, then we see we seem to be ego only so long as we're attending to other things. When we attend to ourselves, there's no such thing as ego to be found.
So why we are saying then that ego is the first, why not say that Shakti is the first?
Because that Shakti is nothing but ego. They're not
Okay,
two. They're not two.
So they are synonyms, yes.
They're synonyms. That the ego itself is Maya. There's no Maya other than ego.
Yes, but Shakti is a property of Brahman, and then we go to Kashmiri Shaivism and not to Advaita, because in Advaita, Brahman is unmovable.
That Shakti is nothing but there is one power. That power is Brahman itself. In its true form, it is grace, which is the power of just being. But when we rise as ego, we use that same power to project all this. That is the power of Maya. When we turn back within to know ourselves as we actually are, we will know that we, the Shakti who have projected all this, are nothing but pure being, and that nothing has ever actually been projected. So this is, Advaita says, Ekam eva Advaitam, there's one only without a second. And what is that one thing? Tattvamasi, you are that. That's why Bhagavan says, Yatharthamai uladu Atma-swarupa mandre. What actually exists is only Atma-swarupa.
There is something here which, Michael, which I'm not quite sure exactly what the problem is, but perhaps it is something like this. The arising of ego is the arising of space and time, and hence any notion of cause and effect, seer and seen, knower and all the rest of it. Until that arising, these distinctions don't really take place.
No.
And what often happens is because we are looking at this thing of that this ego and simultaneity and so on from the perspective of space and time in which we see ourselves or think we are located, we end up with this kind of an issue, that how is this possible? But if ego itself is the arising of space and time, then simultaneity is simply saying that it is the arising of space and time because there is nothing before that arising of space and time in terms of our temporal cognition, in terms of the way we know things and we understand things. I'm not sure if that's helpful.
Another way of putting it, because space and time are all part of a projection. Another way of saying this, that is, we are looking for a cause for the rising of ego. But ego is the first cause. Causality arises, like cause and effect arise only after we arise as ego. So causality, or the phenomena of cause and effect, is itself a part of the projection of ego. So there's no cause prior to ego. Ego is the first cause. It's the cause of causality itself. Because all cause and effect exists in whose view? Only in the view of ego. So there cannot be cause and effect without ego.
Which is Shakti, which is Brahman.
You can, these are just words. You can call it Shakti. Bhagavan himself says in the fourth paragraph of the mind is an Adiseya Shakti in Atma-sarupa. It causes all thoughts to appear. So mind is that Adiseya Shakti. That Shakti is Maya. So there's no Maya other than ego, and that ego is nothing other than Brahman. But when we experience it as ego, it is a misuse of that power. Because the true nature of power is just being. Sadhu Om used that. There's a verse in which Bhagavan says, Bhagavan has written about peace and power. He said, what appears as power when we look outwards is seen as peace when we look within. When explaining that, Sadhu Om gave the analogy of a dam. Which is more powerful, a dam that is holding all the water in place, or a dam that cracks and allows the water to flow out? Obviously, a stable dam, a strong dam, will hold all the water in place. So the real strength lies in stillness, in just being. So the real power is in just being at peace. All this creation is caused by a weakness. That is, though it is said this all a product of power, it's actually a product of weakness. Because if the dam is weak, it will crack. And then the power becomes manifest as all the water rushes forth and floods the valley and destroys so many villages and towns and everything. That the manifestation of power is weakness. Power remaining as pure being, as Brahman itself, that is the true power. That is the supreme power.
Are we saying that we just found a little bit weakness in our beloved Brahman?
In Brahman, there is never any weakness.
Of course, by definition.
So the weakness appears only in the view of ego. But if we investigate this ego, we'll find there's no such thing. So all this problem arises because we are attributing some reality to ego. And inevitably we attribute reality to ego because that's what we seem to be now. So because of that is in ego, there is an element of reality. That is our being, the pure awareness I am. But ego is not that pure awareness I am, it's that pure awareness I am mixed and conflated with adjuncts. So that is, ego is not chit, it is the chit jada granti. It's the not formed by the conflation of chit and jada. So as ego, because ego has that element of reality, we as ego, that is what is real is only I am. When we experience this body as I, the body seems to be real. And because the body is a small part of this vast universe, the whole universe seems to be real. So it all seems to be real in the view of ego. If ego investigates itself, it finds that As ego, it's unreal. As Brahman, as the pure I am, it is real. Just like the snake is wholly unreal as a snake, but it's real as a rope. But we see it as a rope only when we look at it carefully. Likewise, we see ourselves as Brahman only when we look at ourselves carefully. So we need to stop being distracted by all this projection and to see the reality of ourselves, to see who am I, see our own being.
Michael, can't it also be said that Brahman is the causeless one or the one without cause?
Brahman is
Would
without
that help,
cause.
would that help Milind to say
Not only
it's
is
a
Brahman,
causeless one?
yes, Brahman is beyond cause and effect.
Yes.
Ego, like Brahman, ego is uncaused, but it's the cause of all cause and effect.
Mm-hmm.
But as I say, all these questions, all this arises because we are attributing some degree of reality to ego. Ego as ego is wholly unreal. Though there is an element of reality in ego, that alone is real. So we need to stop confusing ego with reality. The real power is the power of being. The power of Maya that projects all this is just an appearance. It's not real.
Yeah, the immanent power, the immutable or immanent power of Brahman, right?
Yes,
where it is not,
that is the power
is
of grace,
immanent,
the power of just
immanent.
being.
Yes, yes, the power of grace. Yes. Does Michael mean that although we start with yoga at some point, we will come to a stage where we will have to do self-inquiry? I was speaking to somebody who said that the person had done yoga for a long time and had reached a quietness of mind, but still found something lacking. Do you think they need to do self-inquiry now? Thank you so much.
Well, when we use the term yoga, it's a term that has many different meanings in different contexts. If we're talking about the system of yoga, the Ashtanga yoga taught by Patanjali, in itself, that is what Bhagavan makes clear, that is, though Patanjali's yoga has 8 limbs, what distinguishes his yoga from other practices is pranayama. One of the 8 limbs is pranayama. All the other limbs are implicit in all other paths. That is the yama and niyama. In any spiritual path, there are things we need to refrain from doing, and there are things we should do. So the yama and niyama is there common in karma yoga, bhakti yoga, ashtanga yoga, and jnana yoga. Asana, well, in most practice, in most, that's not really essential, but in most systems, you sit and meditate on God or whatever. So asana has its place in all these. The dharana, what is it? Dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. I've forgotten, I'm missing one. I've forgotten. Anyway, they're also implicit in all the other paths. That is, in all paths, in bhakti, you meditate on the name or form of God. So what is the distinguishing feature of in the Ashtanga yoga is the pranayama. Pranayama is the technique by which they bring about the cessation of mental activity, chitta vritti nirodha. That is brought about by pranayama is a means to bring that about. But as Bhagavan has made clear, pranayama is a means to bring about the subsidence of mind, but the mind that has subsided by pranayama will sooner or later rise again. So pranayama is a means to achieve laya, but you cannot achieve nasa thereby. The dharana and dhyana and all these, if it depends on what you're meditating. As far as I'm aware, in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, he doesn't specifically mention meditating on Swarupa, on one's own being, on Atma. Whereas Krishna, in the 6th chapter of Gita, which people often say corresponds to Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, it's more or less the similar ground it's covering. But the important thing to notice in the 6th chapter of Gita is, after mentioning all other things, Krishna emphasizes fixing the mind on oneself alone. That is Atma-vichara. So in the same way, Bhagavan in Upadesha in verses 11 and 12, he explains that controlling the breath is a means to control the mind, just like a bird caught in a net. Then in verse 13, he talks about 2 different types of dissolution of mind. He says dissolution of mind is of 2 kinds, laya and nasa. What is subsided, what is dissolved in laya will rise again. What is dissolved in nasa will not rise again. Basically, that's the meaning. I mean, that's not a literal translation, but that's the gist of it. Then in verse 14, he says, the mind that will be subdued by subduing the breath, only when it is sent on the ovari will its form die. Ovari can be interpreted in 2 ways. Or can mean one. Vari means path. So it can mean the one path, or it can mean Orumvari, the path of knowing, the path of investigating. So the one path, if we take it as one path, that path is the path of investigation. So the implication is there only when we direct our attention back to ourselves. When we do as Krishna says, Atma samstam manakritva na kinchitapi chintayat. Fix the mind on oneself, do not think of anything else. That is the only means to bring about the destruction of mind. So if we do all the practices of yoga without attending to ourselves, the most we can achieve is Kevala Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which is a state of Manolaya. If we want to go beyond that and achieve Manonasa, we have to turn our attention back to ourselves. So without self-investigation, yoga is incomplete. Yoga is completed only by means of self-investigation. And the same can be said for other paths. Bhakti. Bhakti, of course, is a very good path and having devotion to God and everything. But so long as we take God to be something other than ourselves, we cannot thereby bring about the dissolution of ourselves. So God, the more we meditate on God, the more the mind is purified, and God gives us the clarity to see. But God cannot be something other than ourselves. He is our own reality. So when that clarity dawns, we turn our attention back to ourselves, and thereby we dissolve back into our own reality, which is God. So the culmination of all different types of spiritual path are brought about by self-attentiveness. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 14 of Uludhanapayana Bandham, the very investigation to whom are karma, viyoga, vibhakti, and ajnana is itself karma, bhakti, yoga, and jnana. And why he says in verse 10 of Upadesha, being having subsided in the place from which one rose, that is karma and bhakti, that is yoga and jnana. And in order to be to subside and thereby be in the place from which we rose, the means is self-investigation. So self-investigation is the culmination and the fulfillment of all other spiritual paths. They all ultimately lead to this. So Bhagavan sometimes said that the only river that flows into the ocean is the river of Atma-vichara. All the other paths are tributaries that flow into that river and thereby are discharged into the ocean. But why is this the case? Because the whole problem is ego. Ego is a false awareness of ourself. So ego can be destroyed only by correct awareness of ourself. In other words, by being aware of ourselves as we actually are. So it's only when we turn our attention back to ourselves to see what we actually are, to be aware of ourselves as we actually are, that we can thereby bring about the annihilation of ego. And annihilation of ego is complete surrender, which is the culmination of the path of bhakti. And since God is that which is always shining in our heart as I, the attending to ourself is itself the supreme devotion. So whichever way we look at it, it's ultimately, it all comes back to self-investigation. It alone can fulfill the aim of all other spiritual paths.
The last question, Michael. I feel I have subtle inclinations for true friendships, and when I don't receive that or someone ignores me, I become really emotional, even though I have so many other true friendships. I can see it is a distraction and shouldn't hurt this way and shouldn't hurt this much. So if this comes up now, just keep looking into my nature, asking who is affected so strongly by this.
Yes, but not just asking who is so affected, strongly affected by this, attending to that I that feels affected by all this. That is, Bhagavan doesn't ask us to ask who am I, or to investigate, or to ask to whom is this. He asks us to investigate who am I, to investigate to whom are all these problems. So whatever problem we face, we need to turn our attention back to ourselves, the one who is facing all these problems. Yes, we all have so many different types of vasanas. We each have our own particular set of vasanas. But for whom are all these vasanas? That is what we need to investigate. Investigating for whom or to whom means turning our attention back to ourselves, the one for whom or to whom all these things exist. To whom all problems exist, for whom all, to whom all problems appear, for whom all problems exist. That is the word Bhagavan used in Tamil, Yaraku. It means both to whom and for whom.
Should we end now, Michael?
Perfect timing. You're
think
sure
it's
we don't
exact-
have any more questions?
Not that I can see.
Okay, very good, very good. Spot on.
Yes, perfect timing. Oh, yes. There is, of course, one which has come through. It
Okay,
says,
okay.
is it like light shining through a prism, whereas the prism would be ego?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many analogies we can use. Yes, but the one real light is pure and undifferentiated. Through the ego, it is diffracted as all this multiplicity. Yes, there's so many analogies we can use, but all analogies obviously have their limitation. But sometimes analogies can help to clarify things. But what's important is that we who now seem to be ego, knowing all this, if we turn our attention back to ourselves to see what we actually are, we will see that what we actually are is pure, immutable, infinite being. It's infinite, so that means it's eternal. It ever exists. It's immutable. That means it never changes at all. So there never is any rising or appearance of anything. There is just pure being. But in order to see that, we need to look at ourselves, attend to ourselves. And thereby we dissolve back into our eternal and immutable being. Can I just say one more thing? I had said at the last meeting that I wouldn't be able to talk about Ashtakam today because I wouldn't have time to prepare for it. But now I'm involved in another work. That is the Ramana Center in Houston are hoping soon to bring out a new translation of Guru Kovai based on Sadhu Om's Tamil prose rendering. And I have been asked to check on various things and also to maybe write a preface or an introduction or something. So I'm engaged in that work now. I'm not sure how long this is going to take me. Hopefully I'll be able to finish it within a few weeks. So I think next session, which is in 3 weeks' time, because it's 5 weekends this month, next session will probably also be a question and answer session like this. Once I finish this Guru Kovai work, I'll return to writing my explanations on Ashtakam. And once I've completed for the next verse, then I'll talk about that. So I apologize for this delay, but I hope useful things will come out of all these things.
I'm sure it will be extremely useful, Michael.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if it's possible to discuss a little bit Guru Vachaka Kovai, just more generally.
Yeah. Wow, Guru Vachaka Kovai, there's so much in it. I mean, we could spend a lifetime discussing it. That would be a possibility. Maybe next time I'll select some verse to talk about.
I think that would be
A good idea.
Michael, there is already Guru Vachaka Kovai of Sadhu Om, right? Like this is
Yes.
something new.
Yeah, this is something new because the translation that's now available is what Sadhu Om and I did in the late 1970s. Sadhu Om didn't have a very good command of English. He could express himself well because of his natural, as a poet and everything, he had very natural powers of expression, but his English, he didn't have a very deep knowledge of English, so he couldn't express himself so well in English. And at that time, I knew very little Tamil, and I was only beginning to understand Bhagavan's teachings. So he would write in his own rough English, and I would polish it according to my understanding. So for a long time, I've wanted to work on that again and retranslate all the verses to my satisfaction now. But I doubt if I'll ever have time to do this. So what has happened in the meanwhile, the Ramana Center in Houston, they decided to make a translation. In fact, I think based on a translation made by Robert Butler of Sadhu Om's Tamil prose rendering. Because originally Bhagavan gave his answer that Guru Vachaka Kovai is a recording of Bhagavan's sayings. But what Bhagavan said, Murugan then put into the form of a verse. So obviously the verse is not the exact words Bhagavan said. So the Sadhu Om's Tamil prose rendering is, in the view of some people, that's closer to the actual words Bhagavan would have spoken than the verses. It's obviously he's paraphrasing the words in the verse as it would have been spoken by Bhagavan. And Murugan had very great confidence in Sadhu Om. He often, when people use, particularly towards the end of his life, Murugan often, when people asked Murugan to explain the meaning of verses, he would always say, go to Sadhu Om. And sometimes when earlier, before Murugan's last days, when he was still in better health, when people used to ask him to explain the verses, he would explain, but he has a very deep way of explaining, and often people wouldn't follow his explanation. So sometimes seeing that people weren't understanding the way he was explaining it, because as Sadhu Om said, when people ask Murugan a question, often they will get the impression that Murugan hasn't listened to their question, he's answering something else. But actually, Sadhu Om used to sit there and hear people asking Murugan a question. Sadhu Om was able to understand why Murugan was answering the way he was answering, because Murugan understood the confusion that gave rise to the question. So he would go right deep to deal with that underlying confusion. And people would listen and laugh sometimes. They'd think, oh, he's talking something else. He's not answering my question. So Murugan often understood, but the way he was answering, people weren't understanding. So sometimes when he found people weren't understanding, he would say, go to Sadhu Om, because he knew Sadhu Om had that ability to put things in a way that people could easily understand. So Murugan and Sadhu Om worked, I mean, for the last 20 years or so of Murugan's lifetime. Well, the very first day Sadhu Om came to Bhagavan, Bhagavan sent him to Murugan. So from that first day, the friendship was established between them, but they were working closely together from the mid-1950s up to the time Murugan passed away in 1973. So they worked very, very closely together, and Murugan had great confidence in Sadhu Om, but Sadhu Om was the only one who was really understanding his verses and everything. So it was Murugan who, because Professor Swaminathan was translating Guru Vachaka Kavai into English for serialization in the Mountain Path, but many places he was not understanding the meaning correctly. So Murugan said to Professor Swaminathan, ask Sadhu Om for the meaning. So Professor Swaminathan had asked Sadhu Om to write this prose paraphrase so that he could translate into make better English translation. So this prose paraphrase of Sadhu Om is very, very valuable work, because it really brings out the intended meaning of the verses. So Robert Butler had translated that into English in his own way, and some people in the Ramana Center in Houston, they've been working to try and bring it closer to the way Sadhu Om would have expressed it in English. So anyway, they've now made this translation, but there are things in it. They have a lot of questions that they want me to check and to answer their questions about things. So that is what I'm working on at the moment, and that is why I've had to put aside the Ashtakam work for the time being. But as Shalini suggests, before the next meeting, I'll choose a verse or maybe several verses to talk about. And so until I finished this work on Guru Vachaka Kavai and got back to working on Ashtakam, that is what I'll do.
Thank you very much, Michael, for sharing this wonderful
Yes.
history and the story. I was in Tiruvannamalai. I was speaking with Shankaran, Sundaram, and all those people. They have a very high regards for you. They were very happy for you, and they told me like I'm in a good hands with Michael James, and the Ramana Ashramam was very happy to know about all this.
I don't know why anyone has a high opinion of me. I'm just a very ordinary devote. If there's anything useful in what I say or translate or do, it's all only by Bhagavan's grace. So it's all, we have to depend wholly on Bhagavan. Don't depend on Michael James. He's very unreliable. But if we depend on Bhagavan, Bhagavan will in some way or other, whether through Michael James or any X or Y, he will give what we need. So it's Bhagavan's grace that's important.
think we can end there.
Right.
Today, so we're looking forward to next week, to the next.
Okay.
We can all do Bhagwan's mantra together.
Yes.
Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya.